Okay, it is 9:30. I want to welcome everyone to the February 17th, 2022 meeting of the Downtown Design Review Board Committee. My name is Gary Jones, and I'm the chair of the committee. The following guidelines are in place for the meeting in the council chamber at City Hall. Only the south entrance in City Hall will be open for access to the building. For exiting the building, all accesses can be used. Air purifying machines have been installed in the chamber, and hand sanitizer machines and disposable face masks will be available. When called upon, applicants and speakers will come to the front podium to speak. Only one person at a time should come to the podium. Please speak into the microphone and identify yourself when beginning to speak. Address your comments to the committee and limit your comments in 3 minutes. Citizens may address the committee on the agenda item by responding to the chair's call for speakers during discussion on each item and signing the speaker log at the podium. All comments must be relevant to the item. The chair or presiding officer may, in his or her discretion, prohibit a person from addressing the committee and/or remove that person from the council chambers if that person commits any disorderly or disruptive behavior. Please see the agenda for more information about those requirements. If you parked in the Sheridan Walker parking garage north of John Rex Elementary School, staff can provide you with a parking validation ticket. The agenda and the documents are located at okc.primegov.com/public/portal. You will then select the Downtown Design Review Committee and then click on an agenda item and relevant documents that'll come up below each item. I'd like to welcome the new Administrative Coordinator for CPUD, Desiree Golden. And I would like to thank Administrative Coordinator Mark Michaud for showing her the ropes today. Welcome. Desiree, call the roll.
Committee Member Jones.
Here.
Committee Member Brannon.
Present.
Committee Member Black.
Here.
Committee Member Copeland. Committee Member Xerer. Committee Member Trujillo.
We do have a quorum, so we'll begin the business. Item 2 on the agenda is approval of the minutes. A motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a second.
Okay, so that was a motion by Blatt and a second by Brannon.
That's correct. Dun, 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 dun. Not processing. There we go.
It was there.
Yeah. Motion passes. So item 3 on the agenda is cases to be withdrawn. There are none. Item 4 is continuance requests. There are none. So item number 5 is the consent agenda, which is DTCA-20-0071 R4 at 500 South Robinson Avenue. Are there any comments from any members of the committee? If there are none, or any comments from the public, then we'll move to the
For comments from the public, we'd have to pull it for discussion. So if any of you want to pull it for discussion, otherwise, you'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent docket.
Sounds good. And for clarification for me and for future, for those of you who don't, this is my first time as chair.
No problem, it's your first time.
Yes.
We'll be general.
So if someone wanted for us to pull this from the public, they needed to let one of us know in order for that to occur. Is that right?
We haven't ever had that happen.
Okay.
If you want to discuss it.
Not a problem.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent docket.
We have a motion from Blatt. Need a second?
Mariana Sagrur, the second.
We have a second for Soro. Motion passes. So that moves us into agenda item number 6. We have one case, DTCA-22-0005 at 1013 Northwest 13th Street. Are the applicants here?
The applicant is here. I'm waiting for the screen. There we go.
All right, staff?
So the case before you is located at the corner of 13th and North Classen. Basically, the entrance, if you're coming down Classen to the south, it's the entrance into the Downtown Design District. The Downtown Design District runs down the center of Classen, just for future reference. So anything that's been approved across the street, say an on-queue, was not in the Design District. So currently, the site is vacant. Probably 5-6 years ago, there was a small commercial building on the corner that was demoed that some of you might remember. And so I went out, kind of walked around the site, took pictures. To the north of the property, which is what that fence is, that's the back of properties that front onto Northwest 14th Street. What you're looking at here is there's about a 10 to 12-foot wide strip of property. It's not an alley. I thought it was, but it's not. That is where utilities are located. There's a couple of trees that are coming down. That's weird. I don't know how that got turned. Sorry about that. And there's also a billboard at the corner. It's a very small one that they're proposing to remove. And so that area I was talking about that is not part of the back of the lots and not part of the subject property is between the power poles and the fence that you're looking at. So this is looking up North Classen from the corner of the property. And this is looking south. The property's on the left. So there's currently a sidewalk that runs on two sides of the property. And at the corner, and you see discussion of that in the staff report, there's a curb cut that's left over from when that little commercial building was there, and that's one of the ways you pulled into it. And so you will see in there that they are going to be removing that. I don't know why it wasn't done when they demoed the building, but it wasn't. So what you have across the street, you might remember we approved that mural that we have on the side of the Housing Authority building, and we have some other commercial buildings. Looking up and down 13th Street, looking across Classen, the little gas station convenience store you might recall that used to be on that corner is now the little Scooter's Coffee. So I'm going to land on that one and discuss in the staff report. So one of the issues, there is one issue under regulations, and that is we have a maximum 10 foot, as you know, from the property line at the right-of-way, and that's from 13th and from Classen. So they're meeting that from 13th Street, but as you can see from Classen, they're not. There is also another setback. There's some special setbacks in another part of Chapter 59 that are much older than the Downtown Design District. And there's a requirement for 65-foot setback from the center line of the right-of-way of Classen. And so that happens to fall 13 feet into the property versus the 10-foot setback. This corner of, so the southwest corner of the building, they're proposing to be approximately 100 feet from Classen Drive. And you can see they have the playgrounds around it for the, this facility. And then they have the parking lot that's on the east side. So they would need a variance from the Board of Adjustment for the setback. And I've provided the section citation for that requirement. In the project description, the applicant stated they've chosen to meet the 65-foot setback as attempting to meet the 10-foot build-to line has several significant challenges, and they list those challenges. The right-of-way of Classen is at a diagonal, and it's kind of hard when you typically build a building that's at a 90-degree and then you have an angled street. And the side has a 16-foot grade change. So it's lower at Classen and then it gets higher. And hopefully some of those photos showed you that. While recognizing the potential discrepancy depending on the right-of-way width and the DTD1 maximum setback of 10 feet and the Classen Boulevard minimum setback of 65 feet, complying with the DTD1 setback should receive priority in the opinion of staff. Grade differences could be addressed by introducing fill and/or retaining walls. The angle of the adjacent right-of-way could be addressed with the design of the west facade. And then I reference the fact it's actually 99 feet from the southwest corner of the property to Classen. And the northwest corner is 153 feet. So it's even further because Classen angles to the west. This site serves as the northwest entrance into the downtown design district. The intent of the DTD1 regulation is to promote pedestrian-oriented, high-activity corridors by bringing buildings closer to the street. Having the building set back 100 to 150 feet from the Classen Boulevard right-of-way does not provide the same experience. Redesigning the layout and the building could still satisfy the needs of the applicant and the intent of the regulation. For this reason, staff is recommending this case be continued. Now, as I referenced before, if it gets approved in its current configuration, they will need a variance from the Board of Adjustment. But since staff is making a recommendation of continuance, if you continue the case today, you do not need to make a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment. There are some issues under guidelines that I also included in your staff report. The applicant proposes to have street-facing facades with minimal glass at windows. So I'm going to get to the colored renderings because in my mind, okay, so there is a requirement on ground floor facades of non-residential uses and when they abut a public street. So we have the west facade, what we're looking at, and I'm sorry, I forgot my glasses. And we have the south. Okay, so these are the two facades, and as you can see, there's minimal glass on the first floor. And the applicant in the scope of work states the design is unable to achieve the 50% requirement on the west side due to the storm shelter. So the storm shelter, I believe, is in the north corner of that west facade. Additionally, the floor plan and safety concerns for the children don't allow for that much glass. They're proposing 7% glass on the west elevation and 9% glass on the south elevation versus the 50%, which is what the guideline calls for. While some accommodation may be necessary for the intended use of the property, staff believes that it is feasible to incorporate more transparency than currently proposed. For instance, if the concern is windows located low to the ground, windows could be included in a horizontal band located higher on the wall. The second guideline that I included that we need to discuss is the applicant proposes to orient the building to the parking lot on the east. So that is the east facade of the building, which is the parking lot side. And the guideline states pedestrian entries should be oriented toward the street and recessed, covered, or otherwise clearly identifiable. The applicant states the building entry is on the east side so that it's located adjacent to the parking lot to minimize the travel distance for parents carrying their children to and from our care. While they have included some similar entry features on the South and 13th Street facade at the request of staff, and not that one. So they added, for example, they added this, which is similar to what's on the east facade. They're not proposing an entry appearance on Classen because of grade and setback. With the prominence of this corner, the design of the street facade is very important. Although the public entrance is on the parking lot, which is the east facade, additional details and features could be added to both the South 13th Street and the West Classen facade that could add entrance and enhance the appearance of the building including the building to pedestrian experience in the urban environment. Another guideline, in fact, it's the last guideline that was discussed in the staff report, is they're proposing to have a parking lot adjacent to Northwest 13th Street without a fence or landscaped area. So let me get back to that landscape plan. So at issue is between the parking lot and the right-of-way, there is a guideline that calls for different things. You have different options. One would be a 3-foot-high wall or fence that separates that from the sidewalk. Another would be a 2-foot-wide irrigated landscape area. When I actually talked to the person that did the landscape plan for this project, they felt that the street tree and the ground cover should be sufficient. And staff feels that while it's not spelled out what the landscape area could consist of, we felt it would be beneficial to this project if they actually had landscaping planted where you could add color and you could add some height, different heights in that area. Staff is recommending this case be continued to the April meeting. As you're aware, if it were continued to the March meeting, we would have to have all of the additional information by next Tuesday, which is a very short turnaround. And we are suggesting the following direction. A, redesign the location of the building so it's closer to the Classen Boulevard right-of-way. B, redesign the building to include a more prominent entrance feature or comparable level of architectural detail on the south and west facades. C, add windows on the west and south facades. And D, add landscaping plantings in a minimum 2-foot wide irrigated landscaped area between the parking lot and 13th Street right-of-way. Now, at your places, I included a copy of an email that I received. And a lot of the people on that email are here. They live on 14th Street, and the back of their property abuts where this project is going. The second thing that I included is the photoplanimetric map that I had requested from them because of a concern. My main concern, and I can't, there it is. Well, there is a light post that I'm going to move in the middle because I can't see where there's a light post at this location that has a pole with two lights. And I wanted to see where the light fell in relationship to those houses. And so that's a copy. And I had copies available until they ran out for people that came to the meeting. That is one of the issues that you saw listed in that email from the adjacent property owners. So there are several of them here today, as well as the applicant is here. And a copy of that email was provided to the applicant. So do you have questions of staff before we get the applicant?
So just to clarify for everybody, we have one item that is an issue of a regulation, and then we have other items which are issues of guidelines. The regulations are ones that we're not here to debate. We're to enforce. It's something that is actually where our task is to uphold the regulations. And then the guidelines are something that we're supposed to reference with respect to how we view the project.
Well,
just for the purpose of the discussion as we're going forward.
Right.
We have a regulation which holds a little more significance than all are important, but the regulation is something that is of higher importance.
What I would say is there have been times in the past when a project has come before you and needed a variance because of a regulation. Most of the time it's a setback. And in some of those cases, you all supported what they were proposing. In some cases, you didn't. I am not aware we've had one that's had this much difference and what our regulation is of 10 feet and what they're proposing to do.
It seems to be a common discussion in this specific case. So so it's clear as we go forward and have this conversation, the regulation is something that we're looking very specifically at, and the guidelines, although very important, the regulation has a higher value.
I would say that so to vary a regulation, sorry, can you hear me guys?
Now I can.
Sorry. If they don't meet a regulation that requires a variance, and in order to get the variance from the Board of Adjustment, they have to prove a hardship. So that's a high bar to meet, and a high bar for you all to evaluate and uphold if you want to support that request for the variance. For a guideline, that is purely up to your discretion if that guideline needs to be upheld for this specific project, or if there's something particular to this case where that guideline is not applicable, or where what they've proposed is appropriate even though it doesn't meet that guideline.
And-
does that help clarify?
Sure, and with respect to a hardship, it cannot be cost. Cost cannot be the reason for a hardship.
I'll let legal answer that.
I believe that is what the case law says as far as financial cost alone. But
Yeah, there are 4 specific state-required questions they have to answer for the Board of Adjustment that's part of that application process.
right, but that would be up to the Board of Adjustment to determine that hardship or whether there was one or not.
Okay, thank you, that's it.
Any more questions of staff?
If there are not any more questions of staff, the applicant. Please state your name and your address and sign in.
And I can give you this if you want to drive it.
Well, this will drive it too, right, if you get me there? Yep, there we go.
I don't know if it does or not. Yeah, it does. Okay.
While I'm messing around here, my name is John Finmore. I'm with Primrose School Franchising Company. Our address is 3200 Windy Hill Road, Suite 1200 East, Atlanta, Georgia, 30339. Hold on a second. Oh, I think am I going the right? I'm going the wrong way. What? There we go. Am I going forward? Yeah, I'm going forward. I don't know.
Let me get back. Let me get you back to where you need to go.
Thanks, Laura. Sorry about that.
Is that the one you want?
Yeah, perfect,
Okay.
perfect. So Primrose is known as the preeminent provider of education-based childcare in the country. We're approaching 500 schools in 36 states, I believe. We have 6 in Oklahoma, the metro Oklahoma City area, 3 of them actually in the city of Oklahoma City. This would be our 4th. We're looking to come to the downtown area. It's a seriously underserved area for quality childcare, and we feel that this corner would be an excellent location, for our school. Laura did an excellent job of, kind of presenting, so there's no reason for me to kind of really go over what we're proposing, so I'll kind of jump right to the recommendations to continue and for us to change some things. And the biggest one is locating the building at the 10-foot setback of both roads. And the main reason why it's not impossible by any means, but the biggest challenge is that 16-foot grade difference as you go eastbound on 13th Street. And additionally, we located the parking lot at the far end, trying to maximize the distance between the intersection of 13th and Classen to avoid conflicting in the stacking for right turn lanes there. And as you know, wherever you locate the parking lot, of course, it has to meet the grade of the adjacent road at the access point. So the elevations of the parking lot pretty much get set by the road. So if we put the parking lot on the east end, but then if we went to move the building all the way to the far western side, as Laura mentioned, it is solvable that we could fit it there with retaining walls and fill, but we're looking at probably a 14 to 15 foot tall retaining wall that would be along 13th as well as Classen. So effectively, all the concerns and discussions about the appearance of the, down the corridor and so forth, people would be looking at, probably would have to be a concrete retaining wall because we're going to have a building 10 feet away from the wall. So, concerns of glazing and materials and so forth, well, those materials are going to be a 14-foot wall. Not particularly, I would think, a good appearance for that, to be at that intersection. And then, that wall would basically continue all the way along Classen, because when you lay out a childcare site, not only do you have to make the parking lot at the same grade as the building because of ADA accessibility, the playgrounds also have to be accessible. So the retaining walls would continue along Classen and 13th. As you head east along the north property line and along 13th, they would slope down to grade and meet the grade at the parking lot. But effectively, yes, a tremendous amount of fill and a very tall retaining wall along two sides would get our building on the corner. I know that from a variance standpoint, costs are never allowed as a consideration, which I've been doing this for about 30-some years, and I've always disagreed with that because costs keep people from developing properties. And this is a vacant site. We're proposing a use that really is needed in the area, and it's unfortunate you can't use the cost discussions. But of course, we won't use that, but it may very well prevent us from moving forward if we were required to raise the site and build that much retaining wall. And I guess my point to the board is that, do you want to see a 14-foot tall retaining wall instead of a building, just to meet a setback requirement, basically? So that's kind of my thoughts on that. And as far as the additional windows, the west side of the building, assuming this current configuration was to remain, we'd be looking at sloping up from Classen to our playground, and then having playground equipment between the Classen Boulevard and our building, so that the actual view of that western side of the building, it would be at a higher elevation, and then it would be behind, a fence and playground equipment. So the real visibility of the additional windows there would be very limited. And the other problem is, as Laura mentioned, starting in this corner, but actually coming all the way down to here is our storm shelter. And so basically those windows and doors that are there, you don't see them here because they're going to be on the inside of the building, but they're storm shutters for those doors that obviously you want to minimize how much glass you have to put those storm shutters on, and then there's limited size of shutters you can get. You can't get a 10 by 10 shutter that closes on a window. So that's why we're really not able to add windows, for that kind of northern 2/3 of the western side of the building. As you can see, we added down here, we've got a triple window here. Normally that would be a double. All these triples would normally be doubles on our building, so we bumped those all up. All these doors would typically be half glass. We made them 3/4 glass, kind of in our attempts to add some glazing there. But that western side is, really kind of almost impossible for us to add. We could add some more windows at the second story maybe, and maybe at that far, to my right, this far side here, there might be an ability to get a little bit more of a window in there. But this 2/3 over here is all storm shelter. So there's really not a way to add windows there. And then if you get me to the south side. Yeah, there we go. Nope, you got it. You got it. Same thing there, where that triple window is, that was a double. We added glass there. We made the windows the door windows 3/4 glass. We could look, as Laura had suggested, to possibly some maybe like transom type windows above the existing windows. As she mentioned, we really try to avoid any windows below. We have a 2'10", I believe it is, sill height. We try to minimize the windows below that height just you know, because kids are going to, you know, obviously we want to be able to look out windows, but we don't want them to have glass at like foot level and, you know, the toys they ride around in the classrooms and so forth. It's just not a good mix. You know, a full storefront kind of office type building setup just doesn't really work great for childcare. But we could look at adding some potential maybe transom windows on this side. We have added this kind of simulation of the actual entrance to the building, which is on the east side where the parking lot is, to the south side. It won't be accessible to the public because those are the three glass doors are all classroom doors, and they have to exit into a fenced area. So to keep the security of the children, we wouldn't be able to have pedestrian access to the south side of the building. And you know, while we're in a neighborhood here, the number of parents that may actually walk their child to childcare, then go home and get their car and then go to work are a handful. I mean, people get in their cars, take their children to childcare, and then go to work. So, you know, having the access to the parking lot for the everyday drop-off and pickup of the children is really essential for our use and for the convenience of the parents. You know, day like yesterday, not a bad day to walk a little farther. Day like today, not so great. So, you know, hence why we, you know, are locating the entrance on the parking lot side of the building. One of the other recommendations we'd have no problem meeting is adding additional landscaping or a wall, or really kind of whatever your preference is, to that area between the parking lot and the street. I didn't realize that they didn't really kind of take it to the levels they should have taken it to, but that's not a problem.
And while we have this elevation, I apologize, I didn't include it in my presentation. You might notice that there's this, looks like a sign that has a red X and some other things. So currently, the sign code in this zoning district allows one wall sign per tenant, even if you're on a corner, even if it's one tenant in the whole building. So some of the play equipment was going to have Primrose on it. They were going to have a second one here. So those are all crossed out. But as you know, because you had a hearing last month, we're in the process of revising our sign regs. And by summer, when those are approved, they'll be able to come back in and get additional signage. So I wanted to explain that. And the second thing that I wanted to mention, one of the items that you see on the email from the neighborhood deals with the location of the dumpster. And so let me get to that site plan. And the applicant provided me an email, a copy of an email that was sent, where, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it would go, could move it.
Well, I'm trying to, I can't see the arrow from here.
Here, I've got it.
But
Trying to move it to here.
The concern from the neighborhood was its location and proximity to the back property lines. And so he had indicated that he could move it, and so that it would be facing east and it'd be further away than that's currently shown on your landscape plan, site plan. So I just wanted to mention that while we had the applicant here.
And I was going to get to the email that Laura's referring to. We received from Alicia and Scott Champion. I believe they live like right here. I think that's their house, that I had responded to, and Laura got it as well. That was the one concern. One of their concerns was the dumpster location. So as Laura mentioned, I had indicated we could move it over here, which, moves it, maybe another 20 feet away. Keep in mind, there's also that 12-foot strip that's kind of not really an alley, but a utility easement. So we've got that additional separation actually from the property lines. Another thing that they had mentioned, and I'd be glad to work with them on it as well, is instead of the deciduous trees along that north property line, maybe looking at more of a evergreen type of a hedge of some sort, just for an all-season separation. Now, every one of the homes there has at least a 6-foot high stockade fence, so there's already a pretty good separation, but it's provided by them, and our responsibility is to provide something as well on our side. So we could look at code dependent, changing those maples to to like a pine of some sort, and and increasing the number of them as well. Their third concern, and Laura had brought that up earlier, was the lighting. We've got that initial photometric plan in, and these would be shoebox type structures. So in order to meet those photometrics, they're already shielded. We can increase the shielding. We can lower the wattage of the bulbs. I mean, if there's a specific foot candle emission at the property line that we were to meet, we can meet. I believe that top line is when it gets down to 0 on that curve up there. Where's my thing? Yeah, I think that's when it gets down to 0, and this looks like it's, well, no, this is that point. This looks like the 1 foot candle, so maybe that's a half right there. So we could change that, like I said, the bulbs and the shielding of those fixtures to reduce the levels of the lighting as it goes across the property line. But we do need to light a parking lot just for safety and the winter months of the year when people come out to their cars in the dark. So yeah, I guess my biggest concern of being tabled and readdressing this is do you want to see a 14-foot retaining wall as opposed to the first floor elevation of a building if we were to put it on the corner, and then just we'll have to really take a look at the economics of that and see if that's even viable. Should you want us to go that route, and whether we'd come back or not with with a site with that much retaining wall and fill, to get it all up to grade. I just don't understand the desire to have a building closer to the corner, the more urban type feel, but the grades here really make that difficult. So I'm open to any questions or follow-up after the neighbors have their time.
So I do have a question. It's clear, and I want to thank you. The project was promoted, and I know is something that people are very excited about because it is an issue that needs to be addressed in the downtown area. Our job, as you know, is to make sure that the guidelines and the regulations are being properly adhered to, and also to make sure that the communities in which you're going to locate are excited that you're going to be there. You've indicated that there have been several efforts on your part in order to address the concerns raised by the staff and also by your neighbors. And of course, the hope is that we could have a continuance on this in order to have more conversations and time in order to figure out a solution that meets everybody's requirements. Can you speak to that?
In which regard? Whether
as far as the continuance, and you feeling that time will allow you to maybe come back with?
I think with some guidance as to what you'd like us to redesign too. Okay. I do have concerns, like I said, of actually putting the building on the corner and the height of those of a wall and then the associated costs with that. But yeah, I mean, we're sure we'd love to get approved to move along, but I don't sense that necessarily being the end result today. But I, like I said, I need some direction as to how do we get there.
That is great to hear. And the reason I ask that is because we, of course, want to hear from the folks that sent the email. And then as we take in all of the suggestions and comments, that hopefully we can discuss and provide some clarity that you can utilize. And I just wanted to make sure that sometimes people come and says, no, we've got to do this right now. We can't do any more, so we're good. And those up and down votes sometimes can be a little complicated. And in this particular case, knowing that you're open to a continuance, then our job now is to see what clarity we can provide as you come back with an updated presentation.
Yep, and we're, we've, I mean, your process is awesomely quick from submittal to meeting. The downside of that is there's not a lot of time in between, so we had reached out even before Laura had her comments to, we had a conference call with Marva Ellard and Kathy O'Connor and got some of their input on our original building. And it was as if they worked with Laura, because Laura's comments were, identical, because they clearly know the code just like Laura does. So we really changed the appearance of our building. We had stacked stone and stucco, and we went all brick, tried to add some windows, so, and then just this week, we got the email on the dumpster and lights, and that's because the neighbors probably just got their packages, so it's a quick process that makes, some of the neighborhood interaction very timely and time sensitive, so we're trying to address it as we go, but, some of these potential revisions are a little more complicated and require a little bit of direction.
Thank you. Comments from other members?
So you're referencing the 16 feet of fall on the site and the potential for a 14 or 16 foot tall retaining wall on Classen. The only way to have a 14 foot tall retaining wall on Classen is to fill it, the entire site flat from the northeast corner, which at that point, if you fill it to 16 feet or 14 feet, you would be higher than 13th Street.
Right.
You wouldn't be able to ingress at that point. So, and your current layout, if you go from the northeast corner down to your south playground structure, that's the full 16 feet.
Right.
From those 2 points. So you're already in the 16 feet. And if you were to start at the northeast corner, you would end up with the same retaining wall unless you balance the site. And if you're balancing the site, which I think that your civil engineer is going to do, then you're still going to be addressing the cut and the fill already. And again, the playground structure is on the steepest part, which means, and it can't slope. I mean, it's going to have to be installed in a way that's compliant with its own manufacturer's instructions. So there's 5 or 6 feet of fall just in that one spot. It's already downhill from where you're going to balance your site. So in the scenario that we're talking about, you're already going to have an 8 or 10 feet, not knowing what the grading plan is going to be. And I think that's going to be critical to understand how this site sits, is understanding how the grading works and understanding where the retaining walls are going to be, because in your current plan, if you actually come in at your location, you can't, for a host of reasons that your civil engineer is going to work through with respect to where your ADA parking is and the slopes that are allowed off the street to that ADA parking and then to the front door, your site's going to essentially start to balance out at that grade line. And,
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
And so for that reason, I think that there's a whole lot more to the grading than's being discussed with what we have in front of us today. But to speak to the setback issue, I do think that it's an important regulation. It's an item that is so far out of deviation from what the intent of the regulation is, that it really should be looked at with a little more scrutiny and with your civil engineer with respect to grading, so that it could meet the intent of the regulation. I think I'm in agreement with all of the comments of staff of regulation or guideline. I hear you saying that there's some of these that you're more than willing to work through, and that's fantastic. I do just think that the current plan in its layout has some information that we can't yet see that will then show how this grading issue is going to work itself out.
Yeah.
And I do believe that balancing the site, even if you obviously you've pushed it all the way to the tips, so you don't have opportunities to introduce slope surfaces rather than retaining walls and some of those kinds of things. But I think if your civil engineer is challenged with, and your team, your design team is challenged with meeting the intent of the regulations and guidelines in a cost-effective manner that balances the site in a way that you're not importing and exporting soil, I think you're going to find that there's something out there that is closer.
Yeah. If I could just comment a bit on that. You're right, we didn't do a full-blown grading plan. I myself am a civil engineer, so I did a little bit of messing around with grades and stuff here. I didn't do cut and fill calculations. I think this current layout would come really close to balancing. And what's a little different here is that, I can't read the dimension here, but it's about 50 feet along that western property line before we get to the fence. We were looking at, once we're back onto our property, doing like a 3-to-1 slope up to that fence. We may need to bring the fence even further to the east. Right now, the way it's drawn, I think we'd probably still be looking at maybe a 4 or 5 foot retaining wall down along Classen, and it would turn the corner on Northwest 13th and go, all the way along in front of the building. So there are already retaining walls here. It's just, how big do you want that retaining wall? And then from our end, because if we did bring it all the way to the corner, go, flat top that, tabletop that whole site, it's not going to balance. It would be a definite fill site.
Correct.
So, and I might speak up, currently there's no retaining wall shown, so that is not, even if you guys were to approve this today, that's not part of the approval. And you'd have to come back with the retaining walls. So I just wanted to
No,
indicate
just
that.
a question procedurally on something like that. I noticed you've got a fairly lengthy administrative approval report. Do those become kind of administrative? If, like, say this got approved today like this?
That would depend on staff's recommendation and the committee's recommendation. We have had retaining walls that, Sixth and Walker, that when they had to change, you might recall, I think Connie was still on the committee then, and they had proposed a very residential suburban style of retaining wall, and they had to redesign it, and it came back to committee because it was not the appropriate look for that location for an office building. So it all depends on the staff and committee.
And that's a good point too from the materials. With a layout like this, we'd probably be looking at like one of those keystone type stack retaining walls. If we brought the building all the way down to the corner, I don't think that I'd feel that comfortable with that, being 10 feet away from a building, and then now you're looking at, more of the, 18-inch wide concrete, solid concrete wall. So it becomes more imposing, I guess, of a look. And I like I said before, I understand the reason for the setback is just the site gets, I think it does meet hardship criteria, that we were hoping to present to the Board of Adjustment this afternoon.
Well, I think that, so with respect to your grades, you're currently coming off of 13 off of 13th between elevation 35 and 36. The northwest corner or northeast corner of the building is 47. So it's 11 feet higher than your influx point. And the point where you have your playground goes from 30 to 35. So where you're coming in is already where your building is sitting, and there's only about 5 feet of fall, but you would be cutting for your parking lot an immense amount of soil that would be available to balance the site. That's what I'm saying. I think that there's more available to you for the design than what you might currently show with respect to this particular plan. And but I still believe, independent of the grades that are being reviewed or at least discussed, I do think that a greater degree of compliance with the regulations is going to be really important for for us to promote the project.
Okay, fair enough.
Additional questions or comments? Seeing as there are none at this time, would anyone from the audience like to come and speak? Name and address.
Good morning. My name is Laura Long, 1001 Northwest 14th Street.
And if
I'm
you
one
could
of the neighbors.
sign in the sheet. For all of you that speak, if you could just make sure you print your name so we can read it. And if you come up to speak, thank you so much.
I was told I had to be legible.
Sorry, that was me.
I I'm one of the neighbors on 14th Street, and we've got together to discuss it once we saw this. And like you mentioned, this was super quick once we found this out. We agree with the continuance because we're excited about the possibilities behind our lots. And we would like to be able to work and see if we can figure it out. It sounded like there's going to be a atmosphere of cooperation, and so we're very excited to see what areas we can just not have to bother the rest of you guys with. What I did do, though, in addition to the email that Alicia sent, is I typed up some notes, and may I approach, these are just talking points, and I thought it might be helpful for you to have.
Do you have multiple copies?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have enough for all of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. While she's passing that out, a couple of the issues that we were just talking about, I think we can jump down. Yes, please, thank you so much. I was going to ask you. I absolutely want to make sure you get it. On these talking points, I think we can skip down to the drainage one first, since that's what we were just talking about. But I want to add another element to that in addition to just leveling the site and where these retaining walls are going to go. I want to make sure in that process that we're also thinking about how that drainage is going to flow back onto 14th Street. And so keep in mind on 14th Street, almost all of these houses have basements. A lot of them have pools in the backyard as well. So we're very susceptible to flooding and drainage as it is. The natural drainage of the street is going to start on the northeast corner and gradually flow southwest. And so if this lot gets built up, that flow that's already coming towards the south now gets pushed back to the north into the houses on 14th Street. And so I'm not an engineer. I don't really know how to fix that, but I do want that on the radar of something that has to be considered. And one of the things that we did notice on here is it doesn't have where the retaining walls are going to be, and it doesn't show where the slope change is going to be, and that's really, really important for the neighboring houses. The lights, it sounds like we're going to be able to figure something out. One of the proposals that we've got is if we could just move those lights a little bit further to the north so that they angle south more, that might keep those lights out of those backyards. Another possibility is just given the nature of the business, that it's a daycare that's only open during business hours, could we put those lights on a timer? So if you guys are all gone from the building by 7 p.m., but yet we're still there all night long, is it possible that maybe at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. those lights get turned off altogether? Possibilities, things to think through. The dumpster, I did want to address. We do appreciate the response to be able to pull that back from the fence line a little bit. I did want to clarify that there's really not a 16-foot buffer there because those fences have already been pulled in halfway. So there's half of that, which I understand is only 8 feet, but I'm kind of making that part up. My point being, I don't believe it's a full 16 feet. I do appreciate the response to be able to pull that dumpster a little bit, but it's still a problem. We've still got a daycare you're going to have, frankly, diapers and food, right? And in nice Oklahoma summers, that's the last thing that we're going to want in our living spaces that we've got in our backyards along that fence line. Is it possible, could we consider moving that dumpster to the east and the south side? And one of the proposals, and let me kind of give a little bit of justification for that, we looked at other Primrose sites, and it is common, or I don't know if it's common, it at least happens in other Primrose sites where the dumpsters are across the parking lot. That's not that much of a hardship to have a dumpster now on the other side of the parking lot to keep it away from existing residences and outdoor living areas. Another consideration, if we do have that dumpster, it is already enclosed in a lovely brick facade, so that helps with the design implementation of that. And we also looked around some of those nearby surrounding businesses, and there are existing dumpsters that have to front Classen, for example, and I understand that's outside of the design review aspect, but it does show that there are neighbors in the immediate vicinity of this lot where the dumpsters are along the street, And I think that in particular makes sense here for a daycare, a lot of diapers, a lot of food, to keep that off the back fence where the neighbors have living spaces. We're excited to hear that the landscape sounds like we can work that out and have conversations with that together. One of our concerns as well, I don't know if it's clear, is along that back fence line are overhead power lines. And so trees are not really a realistic option. OG&E is not going to allow those trees to be planted.
They wouldn't be allowed to be planted underneath the power line, but they could pull them in so that they're not under the power line, which is what I'm assuming they were going to do. So I was going to try to get back to those 10,000 pictures I took along the property line, which is in that area. That's one of them.
Yeah, that's perfect. You can see those power lines. So once those trees start growing, which maple trees tend to do, those trees are just going to be chopped down by OG&E, which is what happened on this street on Classen. There were some lovely trees stopping that area, and those trees got butchered. So there's no sense planting these beautiful trees, which we love trees. We love vegetation of every kind. But it makes sense at the outset to understand the implications of those power lines. Another possibility, which we would love, is if those power lines were buried, then let's go forward with the trees. But we at least wanted to address that as we're in the design planning.
Questions for the speaker? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have one question for Laura. In this area is not the request detention pond for the raining? The retention pond, the like lake or?
I'm having a hard time hearing you down here. We don't have a speaker here anymore.
Detention, is there any requirement for detention, stormwater detention on the property?
That is not something that we have in our regulations. I believe it's something that they have to address, and Tony could, when they submit for a building permit, which is down the road. Am I correct on that?
I guess more than 1 acre you need it right now in the code, but need to verify that.
It would come up in the review from.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's down the road a little bit, but they will have to address that. I just don't know what that criteria is because that's not something we review for. There's a whole stormwater section.
But I think if this is continued, we can certainly find that information out for you just so that we can respond to that.
Hi, I'm Marva Ellard, 1521 North Chartel. John, nice to meet you. In person. As John said, Kathy O'Connor and I have talked with John about this project probably 3 weeks ago. In general, we're very excited about the services that it brings to the neighborhood. I know Midtown Renaissance, Chris and Mickey and Bob have worked for years to come up with a solution for this property that the neighborhood would be happy about. And I think that this is one that we all believe provides needed services and a less intrusive use than a lot of other things could. We do agree that the windows are drastically better but could still stand some improvement. The brick facade was something that Kathy and I talked a lot about and are very happy to see. Somehow screening that parking lot more, either with a little retaining wall or that in combination with some landscaping, I think would be a nice addition on 13th, so the parking lot is not quite as prominent as it appears in the drawings. I'm going to stay out of the class and setback deal because that has plenty of scrutiny right now. Just something to our neighbors. I'm Gaylord Pickens' next door neighbor, and so we all learn to live with each other, and they have several events a year that are pretty loud weddings, but I'm so happy to have them as a neighbor. I can get over it. I found that I like their parking lot lights because I can see if anybody's over there that doesn't need to be over there, and I know if anybody is roaming around the property or endangering their property, then I can give them a call. But there are quality outdoor lights that focus light downward and not outward and not over to the neighbors, and so I'm sure there's some compromises that can be made on that. But we had a board meeting Tuesday and told the board about it. We didn't take action on it, but I think the board in general is supportive of this use and what it does to enhance the lives of our younger neighbors in the area. So it does appear that compromises can be reached, and we're willing to do whatever we can to help make that happen.
Thank
Are
you.
there questions for Marvin before you leave? Thank you. Are there any other individuals in the audience that would like to speak? Okay, thank you. So at this time, committee, what are your thoughts?
I didn't know if you wanted to allow the applicant
Oh, to speak to what was presented?
to address maybe anything that just came up.
Thank you, Laura.
Put the site plan back up. Thanks. The landscaper site plan,
Yeah,
any one of them.
somebody else is
Oh,
gonna.
somebody's got control, huh?
Yeah. Okay, is that one there, okay?
Yep, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
So just a question here. You know, I had mentioned we would be glad to move it here. Obviously, we like to keep the staff from having to drag garbage across the parking lot. Not just, it is an inconvenience, obviously, but it also, stuff gets left behind, which, you know, nobody likes. You know, we could just as easily move it here. I don't know that it does anything other than puts it across the parking lot. You know, it's still equally close, you know, to this neighbor instead of this neighbor. This would be the other point. I mean, that's typically not a kind of a permitted location within cities to, oh, I'm sorry, right down here, if we were to move it to this corner, you know, right along the right of way.
As long as all the maneuvering takes place on your property, there's not anything that would prohibit you from putting it there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an ideal spot for us, you know, because the westbound traffic on 13th is going to see the back of the dumpster before the building.
We
But-
have that in other
Yeah,
places, and since it's going to be masonry, I mean, we have that at the Hampton Inn over on E.K. Gaylord, and it's on, I think on 5th Street, right there at the corner. So, and that's the furthest away from the houses.
and it would be. I guess, you know, and I understand the neighbors' concerns. I just was thinking back to when I lived in a house in Denver for a number of years, and, you know, we had common dumpsters in the alley, you know, so it was kind of the place where dumpsters went. You know, but if that would, you know, really help move things along, we could put it there.
Well, and if you put it at that location, because typically you end up with reinforced concrete where the garbage truck is going to be, so that would actually have a shorter path of the
Right.
reinforced concrete, and they could come in, turn to the right, load it, back up, and pull out the drive. And I'm assuming, unfortunately, they do that at the wee hours of the morning.
True, and again, the distance will help a little bit with the noise of the dump. But yeah, that is something we could look at, and I think everybody agrees there's a lot we can do with the lights as far as locations of them, heights of poles, bulb sizes, et cetera, that, you know, we really don't look to, by any means, overly illuminate our parking lots. Just as Marvin mentioned, it's a safety kind of situation. I mean, from the safety aspect of the parents and staff coming out, that kind of stops, you know, 7 o'clock at night. But if you turn it all off and it's just dark all night, you can start to have additional security concerns that, you know, I don't think the neighbors would want, you know, happening out in the parking lot just, you know, south of their area. But we definitely can work on the lights a lot. We're not looking for, you know, used car lot type lighting, where it just shines from, from satellite view. But we can certainly work on that. Thanks.
Staff would like to thank the applicant. There was a significant redesign of the building after comments that Marvin mentioned, and when they received our comments, and it's vastly improved from the original submittal. We still have some issues. We also would like to thank the adjacent property owners. We appreciate input from people. Most of the time when we have a meeting, you guys don't ever see anybody. And so it's kind of a nice change to have people here. Unfortunately, it's a pretty crappy weather day, but thanks for coming out for that.
And if I could add one more thing, I'd be amiss if I wasn't to say Laura's been fantastic to work with. The neighbors, I understand their concerns, and they've brought forward, viable concerns with solutions. Usually I'm, addressing, we don't want you there, and those are actually easier to deal with, but these are the kind you can work with and work together and get, because we're here to provide a service to the neighbors. We don't want to alienate them by any means. So, yeah, everybody's been great. Thanks.
I know that when you talked earlier that you were hopeful to get guidance. There's been a lot of conversations and discussion about potential options. Do you feel you have enough to work with as you move forward?
Well, the big thing is, really, do you want to see a wall of that height on the corner? That's the biggest direction that,
I think from this perspective of staff, what was given to us, which didn't show a retaining wall, we knew there was, we could see the changes in elevation, so there was that component that wasn't included. And I understand that a lot of times that comes later. You want to see if you can get it approved, but that's a real important missing piece of information to help us figure out, well, maybe we can't support a 100-foot setback. Could we support a 20-foot or a 25-foot setback? But I don't think we will know that until we see what that could look like.
Laura, I agree. I thought Tony raised some very valid points. I am not an architect or an engineer, but he had indicated that with the grading and with the slope, that it would possibly result in some other options or modifications that you might be able to look at that might be a win-win for everybody on this. So my hope is that moving forward, as you guys get more into that detail, that hopefully it will provide some options that will work for you.
Yeah, and it'd be hard to for you guys to answer it now, but if I had an idea of how tall of a wall would be acceptable and if any variance on the 10-foot setback, would 25 be okay? Something like that would kind of give us a little more direction of which way to go. And that's what I'm saying. I know it'd be hard to really give me but it's just, in my mind, it seems like the combination of the 10-foot setback and a potentially 15-foot wall, again, cost prohibitive on my end, but from your end, it just doesn't seem like that to get the 10 feet, you'd want to see 15 feet of wall. So, is it a 5-foot wall and we could be at 25 feet? I don't know if that would work, but is that the direction to try to take this, I guess?
And I mentioned this earlier, 6th and Walker. I don't know how many of you drive by there.
Yeah.
It might not have been the solution, but the solution we landed on, that is at least a 10, it's 3 tiers, so that's at least a 10 to 14 feet maybe, total retaining wall.
I think it's going to be a iterative process with your civil engineer and the location of the building. Again, if you enter the building site where you are right now, the very most that your retaining wall is going to be is 6 feet. Because that's the height from the entrance point to the lowest point of the grade going to the west. You're cutting into the building as you go east, and then if you go all the way to the northeast corner of the property and you have not done any grade adjustments, you'll have an 11-foot retaining wall in the northeast corner of the property, which they're all challenges. So I don't think that the issue is so much the wall that's going to be opposed upon us, because it seems like that wall is going to be modest if you're going to be entering anywhere near the location that you're showing. And if you start entering actually closer to Classen, your wall starts getting shorter. I really think that rather than try to put a number or a pin on a number, you really want your civil engineer to, and your design team, your architect, your civil engineer, everybody to really take a look at what the site can provide and then see how that works for you and with respect to the regulations. I think that's the way that this will be able to kind of.
No, and like I said, I didn't expect, okay, design it with X height and this distance, but just to get kind of a feel for which things were more important to address. One other thing I just thought of, and I don't know if this would help us at all, but we're obviously showing our access point on Northwest 13th. It's a right in, right out, whether it's there or whether it's on Classen. They're both, boulevarded roads.
What I'll say about Classen is that's where the new, I forgot what it's called, the rapid transit is coming through, and there's going to be a stop there.
I think
which is near the corner, and so I just wanted to mention that because that's going to make it very more interesting if you decide you want to try to have an access off of Classen.
I think entering.
Yeah, we kind of figured it was the busier road and not knowing anything about a, rapid transit type stop, that it just was the side to avoid, but I just wanted to know if, a potential entrance at that far northwestern corner would, would be received with any positiveness. I don't know that it would even help me. I just wanted to know, whoops, God, I'm having troubles here.
I think at a location at that, which gets it closer to the back of houses that are now backing up to what the play area is, I think that's going to create some situations that maybe not a good idea to consider.
And another reason we didn't put it over there, because that would then put parking along the north property line as opposed to the east, and again, why we put it on the eastern side. But I just wanted to know what, how many pieces I could work with as I try to redesign. So, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Committee?
I think the one comment that wasn't discussed in great detail that staff had made was about the windows and the transparency. I think we heard a little bit about that from some of the residents, but if the committee had any further guidance on if you feel like they're close and you're happy with where that is, or if you think that needs more, just one other thing that we didn't have a lot of discussion about here.
Because one of the options that the code speaks to, or the guideline speaks to for the transparency deals with, how is that worded? Consists of clear or tinted windows and or doors and or display windows set into the building wall. So when the museum came in, and I wasn't back yet, they ended up being able to meet it because they put display walls in. We've had some hotels that came in, the Hampton Inn, that we talked to. That's an option because we know you don't want a lot of windows into your laundry room, that type of thing. So there are other options versus actual windows that would create that transparency per the guideline.
And we've seen other things like that. There was a requirement on the building on the southeast corner of 10th and Broadway, and that entire facade was into a community room, and the windows are almost entirely false, but they read as windows. I think that that is another opportunity to improve the submission to a specific number. I'm not sure that I'd like to see what would come back, because I think that it's, and this is my opinion, I think that it's more of a holistic review of the project, because there's all of these guidelines. I'd like to see how they all come back presented to us. What's the opportunity for these spaces? I realize safe rooms have some real issues with windows, and they've taken care of the ones that they've got, but there's other opportunities for windows on the facades.
I agree, and the fact that Laura, you and your team are going to be engaged and you can provide at least some additional information of what has been approved and recommended in the past that was acceptable?
So staff made some suggested direction to include in a motion. You don't have to do that. You could change it if you're so inclined to vote to continue it.
I'll make a motion to continue the case to the April 21st, 2022 DDRC meeting with the following direction. Like the applicant to consider and review the opportunities with their design team to redesign the location of the building so it's closer to the Classen Boulevard right-of-way, to redesign the building to include a more prominent entrance feature or comparable level of architectural detail on the south and west facades, to add windows or a comparable item to the south and west facades, and then to work with staff to address the comment on landscaping and plantings in a minimum 2-foot wide air-graded landscaped area between the parking lot and the 13th Street right-of-way.
And did I also hear, did you want to include anything about the dumpster location? I didn't have that.
And to work with the adjacent property owners and staff to find a compromised location for the dumpster enclosure.
And maybe the lighting in the parking lot?
And to address the lighting in a manner that can provide safety for the applicant, but shield the adjacent property owners from light spilling over onto their property.
That is a Brennan motion. I need a second.
Wait,
Dennis.
that was,
Blatt.
Oh, Blatt, why did I say
I'm
Brennan?
like, what?
Sorry, my fault.
Anton. Mariana Sarur, the second.
Sorry. The date for the next meeting?
That is April, well,
21st.
it was continue it to the April 21st meeting.
Okay, sorry. That is a Blatt motion. I need a second. Sarah?
There, second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Vote. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving to the next item on the agenda is other business. There is none. We have communications. Under that, we have administrative approval report. Does anyone have a question or a comment? Seeing as there are none, we'll move into comments from planning department staff. Laura.
So you will probably hear from me the beginning of next week. We're currently deciding if we're actually going to have a meeting next month. We got some applications in, but I think they can be done administratively. And so we want to let you guys know sooner rather than later so you can make best use of your time. And then I don't know if Katie wants to put another bug in everybody's ear about the March.
Yes, we've got a commission committee training the morning of March 4th. It'll be at the Oklahoma City Convention Center. You have a tentative save the date on your calendars that we've sent out to you. I'll be updating that to make it official and give some more information about the agenda. We plan on dedicating some time to updating you all on the status of the code update and also giving you time as commission and committee groups to really dig in on information specific to your work, to your areas and your districts, and then as well talking about things that we always go over as far as best practices and questions that commission committee members always have. So if you, we're not doing a formal kind of head count because we're not serving lunch this time, it'll just be a half day, but if you can either accept or, it doesn't say reject, what's the word? Accept or not accept the invitation so that we have a general idea of head count. That'll be helpful.
Thank you. Just did that.
Great.
All right, Laura, anything else?
Nope.
Okay, committee members, any comments, questions? Seeing as there are none, the next meeting date is potentially April, because
Well, yes, but the
the next one is March 17th.
yes.
Thank you. With that, meeting adjourned.